Welcome, everybody, to the Living Consciously television show, coming to you live from our Denver Internet Television studio and also on YouTube Live, as well as ConsciousRevolutionMedia.com. I'm your host and your moderator, Coach Steve Toad, and our theme today is how to access that goodness in the perceived failures in our lives. And our guest today is the Honorable Lee Gerdes, founder and CEO of Brain State Technology. I introduced you like somebody important in our government.
I wish he wasn't in government.
That's scary.
The Honorable Lee Gerdes, I think you deserve it. You are very honorable. So that just came to me out of nowhere. That's how this show works. So welcome to the show, and he's joining us from Arizona. And let me introduce you to our guest cast as well. And starting from the left, it's Jamie Lerner, and she's joining us from Chicago. She's part of our South Evolution cast. And I usually say she's just from the Windy City, but I think today it's the coldest city in the United States, is it?
It is. It's very cold here, but it's wonderful to be here with you all.
Great to have you. And also next to Lee, to the right, is Nina de Rosa. She's also part of our South Evolution cast, and she's joining us from Las Vegas, where the lights never go out. It's the most interesting town or city, I think, in the United States. Welcome to the show.
I agree with you. The most interesting, fascinating, completely different living here than coming for a weekend. But I love it. Having a great time. Good to be here.
Good to have you.
Thank you.
Also have, to the right of Nina, we have Tori Kaczynski, and he's also part of our South Evolution cast, and he's joining us from the Big Apple, New York. Welcome to the show.
Hey, everybody.
It's great to have you, Tori.
Thank you.
All right, so since we're talking about all the perceived failures that a lot of us in our lives take as not really goodness, but badness, let's begin the show with maybe Lee, and then all of us can chime in as to maybe giving us and the viewers some examples of a few times, or maybe one time is enough, probably two, where life has taken us down to our knees. Lee?
Yeah, taking us down to our knees. It's a recent situation for me. So not all that much fun to talk about, but the fact is, it's in terms of fun, but it's amazing to talk about in terms of awareness in life. I was diagnosed with cancer in 2013, and then went through cancer treatment, both chemotherapy and radiation, for a large tumor in my lung. The likelihood of my life expectancy was shortened. Gosh, I can even laugh about it now.
That's cool. That's cool.
And with less than with only a 40% chance of living through the year. So I paid attention to a lot of things. One of the things that happened for me was that I started, and one of the actual reasons why I came up with the idea of my family meeting me my children meeting me in Hawaii in this Christmas was because I thought of a palm tree, and I thought of there are devastating hurricanes, and a palm tree, sometimes you'll see those palm trees in really, really high wind, which literally will be bent over, almost touching the ground. And the fact is that those are the very times that those palms grow the most. So some palm trees, you just see them to be quite large, and it means that they have gone through many storms.
Interesting.
It's not that I want to be large.
Okay, all right.
But you want to be strong.
But I want to be strong, and I want to be alive in the face of the storm. And that's and robust in that life. And that's, I guess, Steve, strength that we're talking about.
Mhm.
So that was sort of my experience, and I don't know that I would have ever been able to open myself fully to that which is beyond me if I wouldn't have been brought fully to my knees.
Wow.
There was,
So I'm really curiously, just in terms of the process, I know that at the beginning when you were told that you had cancer and you didn't have long to live, that had to be devastating. I can't really say I would be lying to everybody right now if I said I know what that's like, because I don't. However, I'm just curious, when did you begin to notice what was good in this experience? What's the good that come of it?
it was actually a lot sooner in the experience that one would think. It, but it wasn't consistent then, if that makes sense. I became so ill from the therapy and the treatment that I would lose the idea of my growth. It seemed at times that it was destroying me and not helping me. And in fact, in this particular case, as you probably know, with chemotherapy, it does sort of destroy you. You're infused with poison. So that is an important aspect of it, certainly. And then you got glimpses of that along the way, and I got glimpses of that after I worked on my brain to help myself in clarity of thought.
Lee, what sort of cancer did you have? Where was it?
It was lung cancer and lymph cancer.
And were you a smoker?
You know, people ask me that question, and I'm going to answer it, but I have to tell you that I'm doing this with some reluctance.
It's okay.
Let me explain why. It bears with it a judgment that I don't like.
Okay.
People say that, and immediately they're judging me for giving myself cancer.
Correct.
Now, truth. The highest rate of smokers in the world is Japan. They have one of the lowest cancer rates. And so if there were a exact correlation between smoking and cancer, it would show up where they smoke the most, and it does not.
I have another question for you, which is, do you think that the way they explained to you what you had and your chances for surviving the year and the treatment that followed, that explanation, if it had been presented differently to you, that you would have embraced it differently and had a different experience going through all of that?
No. The internet is just too quick and easy, and that's the first thing I did. I went to, I was reading and researching every kind of statistic I could find.
And was that not helpful to you?
No, it was helpful in terms of clarity, but it's not helpful in terms of single purpose. So yes, I was a smoker. It was 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it does take about 10 to 12 years to grow the size of the tumor I had. Just because I happen to be a tall guy it didn't mean in my mind I should have a tall tumor, but I did.
I love it.
I guess that's not funny either, is it? But
well,
there are many causes. There are many causes, and probably one of the chief causes, at least in our United States versus the U.S. compared to Japan, for example, is our diet. So that's all causation. But as soon as I got over the cause thing, because I went into the cause thing looking for something to blame, and finding something to blame was exactly the wrong thing.
So you went into not trying to find out how and why, you went into to blame something of what you'd done in your life?
No, you go in to find out how and why, of course, but in fact, why asking those questions mean that you're looking for a reason and a source of the dis-ease. There are many reasons and many sources of that dis-ease, and literally of every dis-ease we have. However, in this case, it was life and death for me not to ponder that very long, but to be instead in the current moment of the treatment that I was dealing with.
Did the question come up, Lee, why is this happening to me?
Oh, yeah.
And what was the answer?
Why not?
And what was the answer to why not?
Who better?
Wow.
And if I'm going to be that, if I'm going to really be what I think I can be yet, it was an opportunity. That was my good day.
Listen, on your good day, thinking how you were thinking, do you think that you were thinking so positively that kind of healed you, rather than thinking of the depressing side of it, that you actually got your energy within to help you heal yourself?
I think that helped the treatment to heal me.
Okay.
I think that helped so that my body didn't fight against the treatment. And I even have an explanation of that, from actual brain patterns, what happened there. So, yes, it was all part of it, but it doesn't have to be that big a thing.
Lee, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I love the way you felt when you say it was a good day, and I'm still resonating what you said earlier about the palm trees, because it was about 10 or 11 years ago. I had a trip to Fiji, and the trip was canceled due to. You're smiling. Are you familiar with the big storm they had back then?
Yeah, a little bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to a Robins event, and every tree was stripped of its leaves, all the palm trees. And I saw pictures of it because they actually postponed the event only because they wanted the guests to have an outstanding experience, and they didn't believe that experience could exist with a bunch of sticks coming out of the ground without leaves. So they only postponed the trip for 3 weeks. And you know that in 3 weeks, the palm trees completely rejuvenated themselves because they have been so used to, like you said, conditioned to be battered, bruised, beaten down. They adapted to grow back. And I can't help thinking as I listen and watch you tell your story of how more resilient do you feel, especially when you make a comment like, who better for this to happen than to me? Because you apparently feel like a strong individual, which I can see that coming through you, or I'm feeling that. And would that be an accurate statement that you feel like you're more resilient now having been through this experience?
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, I feel more resilient. I felt more resilient before with going through hardships in different things. For example, when you're leading a company and you go through a financial crisis in the company, you come out of that financial crisis and you have a lot more knowledge, you have a lot more wisdom, and you have a lot more belief, hope, and capability. And I think that's fabulous, and that's how you grow in terms of, that's what experience does for us. In some cultures, that experience happens in life with age, and therefore they revere the elderly, for wisdom. In our culture, unfortunately, that is not true. And we hold the elderly to some degree with disdain.
Right.
So I think I heard between the lines and what you were sharing is that what you got out of it in terms of good is strength. You also got the support and the love of your family. What else?
You find out the most important things, right? Because when you're totally stripped down like the trees were, you know, and I had clothes on, folks, okay? But
Oh, I'm so happy.
Well, it was just one of those things, wasn't it, that's open in the back?
no, not for
We
me.
talk about hospitals.
It was in my chest, okay?
Touche.
Okay, whatever that's called. Yeah.
A gown.
Yeah, that's called a
It's a
gown.
gown.
Okay.
But but there's an opportunity to grow new, and then you wonder about how much time you have, and so you put energy into growing new. That's really important.
Yeah.
And I may have and I saw myself having had wasted time before, and not held sufficiently precious. For instance, my relationships with my kids. That's really important to me. Much more important to me now. It's not that it wasn't before. It's just important to me in a wholly different way.
I think that we understand it differently. Is that, I mean, I think that when we go through something, that we have a different understanding of our interpersonal relationships with the people that we love, and the knowing that they love us. So, yeah,
and the energy, I think it's the energy that we suddenly produce to ourselves of, you know, like you said, you love your children before, but you love them, I don't want to say in a different way, but you handled it in a different way. Whereas when you went through what you went through, and you suddenly realized that all your children were all around you and loved you so much. In other words, they were actually honoring you, and they were actually saying, hey, Dad, we really love you, and we really want to be with you. And you just saw this as a totally different picture. Not that it was very different before, but it was a different way of looking at it. And I think you saw it in a different way, how much they really did love you.
I'm hopeful. Exactly, that's right. I'm hopeful that I wasn't just egotistical before.
Well, you probably were.
But I probably were. I am a male after all.
Hello, we all are.
But the fact is, I saw myself as the parent and taking care of them. And now, all at once, I saw myself as having being taken care of.
How beautiful.
And it was all the same thing. And it's what was just mentioned. It was all love.
Yeah.
Boy, that's cool.
Lee, how did this change your relationship to Brain State Technologies, a company that you founded and the company that's doing incredible scientific work regarding our brains and the balancing of the brain? How did that change?
Well, first of all, I became an N=1 of a success story for Mayo Clinic. And so, all at once, Brain State is now invited, based on my experience, to participate in some studies of working with cancer patients during treatment to see if we can help them sustain themselves, you know, through the treatment, i.e., help them bend and not break. And that's exciting. And Wake Forest also is now going to do a study in that same area. Because, as you probably know, those who meditate and have done it for a long time are much more successful at going through cancer treatment than those who haven't ever done it, haven't meditated. And that's just that's scientific evidence, and there's a lot of it. And so now we have a possibility of having a technology that can bring that same kind of prowess to the fore for cancer treatment. And so that's one thing that I had never thought about before, and frankly had never wanted to even get close to, for a whole number of reasons.
So can I just ask a question in here? So if someone is diagnosed with cancer, or whichever it would be, and you just said that the people that have take meditation, they have an easier way through it. So if somebody's found out they've got cancer, would it be a good idea for them to start doing a meditation to ease their body, to sort of heal it within, which is what I was just asking you, if you were feeling good about yourself and trying to heal yourself within. So I believe meditation is to heal yourself within.
It would be a great idea, but it's a very, very difficult one. At
Why?
that state, because you are tipped over. You've just been diagnosed with cancer, and meditation is the last thing you think about or want to do.
Yeah,
most people I bet are very angry and resistant. And
exactly. There are all kinds of
So
of
meditation would help that.
But you probably are so far from even embracing anything like that.
But at the same time, it's nice for our audience to know that it's never too far to take meditation if you are in that position.
Actually, I think, let me just interject. So I think people should meditate now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, true.
Don't wait until you get cancer.
Yeah.
Well, I absolutely agree with you, Steve.
Start today.
But I was just asking if they find out that would help them to increase, getting better or addressing what they have would help them. Right, Lee?
I don't know the answer to the question.
Well,
I don't know that. I don't think the statistics bear that.
Okay.
At all. I think it's energy it's a potential another failure. There's high potential for another failure. It's the last thing they need. And so, and that's why I think that many cancer treatment centers have backed off from it. They don't recommend it anymore, even though they may offer it. And it's not that easy. When your brain is so dramatically imbalanced, it is not easy to get there.
Well, not easy for anything.
Where does the state of denial factor in? If somebody is just not interested in engaging in that reality of the diagnosis, where does it?
I think it comes from the brain not being able to effectively get its arms around it because of the dramatic difference that happens in the pattern upon hearing those words. We can say those words right now, and the audience we have can listen to those words. But when they're told to you, it's a whole different reality. A whole different reality, and it's very traumatic.
So Lee, it sounds like those words start a negative or a downward spiral, right? So if you're in that spiral, trying to meditate, and then again potentially failure because the individual hasn't had experience with meditation, can add to that downward spiral as another, say, failure. Would you say, where do you feel, or have you experienced just plain ordinary hope as part of your ability to overcome this illness, or is there anything that stands out in your mind outside of looking at what the medical the medical side did for you that you would say that one thing really helped me?
Somebody told me once that hope was a figment of my imagination until I took steps toward it.
Meaning the treatment?
No, well, yes, potentially that, but also being able to take some kind of steps oneself. In my case, it was changing my. I came from the Midwest. We were accustomed to having meat 3 times a day.
Good Lord. Oh, that's heavy.
And in my case, it meant
Protein is not a bad thing.
yeah, no, it's a good thing. In fact, you know, the old Indian saying, right, that a vegetarian meant poor hunter. That's a joke.
It's the most misunderstood, Lee.
I love
Protein.
I love the whole idea of getting protein sources from plant-based food directly instead of secondary sources, and have really embraced that as part of my lifestyle. So I took some steps, right? And whatever those steps are for someone, I think they're important. And I had a caregiver that would take steps and kind of encourage me along the way. I had, the chief of oncology for Mayo Clinic. Yes, I was fortunate to have that level of care. But she said, I will not talk with you. I will not have you as my patient until you can understand that we are not going to talk about treatment. We are going to talk about cure.
Yes.
Wonderful. Wow.
Great.
Yeah, words
Actually,
are so different.
as you were talking about this, I was actually thinking about asking you, in your experience going through the hospital and the clinics, all of that, how did you experience love and fear? Not just from your own perspective, but from the perspective of the people that were assisting you and the environment.
Well, you saw the internal medicine person, when they looked at the initial X-rays and then immediately CAT scans. They kind of said, goodbye. The pulmonologist said there's no chance for any kind of surgery, and after doing the biopsy, his words were, I would think his bedside manner was a little to be desired, but his words were, that was the most angry, bloody mess I've ever seen. I thought, oh, God.
Wow.
Oh, thank you very much. And then the oncologist, as I said, she was a warrior and had the strength and courage of a warrior. And then I realized that I had to be the warrior, and she was going to lead the charge, and I was going to be in her army. That's all there was to it.
Lee, did you have the support of prayer in your particular situation?
I prayed before, but I never prayed like I prayed a lot in my life, actually. I've never even come close to the prayer I had during treatment.
When you were praying, did it increase the level of hope?
Yes, by increasing its solidness. I had a mantra during. I built some mantras, which were helpful. So during certain parts of treatment, because I had 33 radiation treatments, so during that treatment, while I was on the table, my mantra was to talk to my cancer cells and explain to them that they weren't going to live.
Awesome.
Goodbye.
That what they could do is mutate back to healthy cells and we could both live, or what they could do is die, or what they could do is cause us both to die, but they weren't going to live unless they, went back to healthy cells. So that was part of it. And then the other part of it for me was going back to the 23rd Psalm. That was something from my, childhood. It was part of my religious upbringing. Um, and then that became, very, very important to me.
The reason I asked about the prayer and the hope is because for me it resonates with belief. And when you talk about placebos and nocebos, when a doctor says that the cancer is the angriest mass they've ever seen, even a hopeful individual would step back and say, "Oh my God, what is happening to me?" And you can attach yourself to that. Or I just love what you did with the cells because it just changed the dynamic in that space for you. And that was probably one of the most powerful things I've heard an individual ever say. I just love that conversation with yourself and your unconscious, which is really is who you are. And it's wow, that's awesome, Lee. I applaud you.
But when after that doctor said that to me, that was one of my darker days. Because what occurred to me is that I will never get better. And from there, I realized, as in the days that followed, as I did achieve some getting, quote, better, at times, that it was something else carrying me. That it wasn't me doing, it was me finally getting to the essence of my being, and then having the life energy, or God, or however you want to think about it, carry you. Having the faithfulness of having the faithfulness of life for me. You and I.
So you actually knew you were going to get better. You actually knew that. You actually put that within your mind, had you? No.
Mm-mm. No, I didn't at that point. But I was okay with that too.
So there was no resistance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But you know why there was no resistance? Because I didn't have any fight in me. It was the funniest thing. Yeah, it was just such a kick. Here I was, thinking I was, capable, right? And then all at once I didn't have a bloody thing left. Not an ounce of energy anywhere. Could barely.
How do you feel about it now? Lee, how do you feel about it now? Because you're laughing. You've got all this energy. Your face looks amazing. You've got all this great charisma going on. But when you go back to that point when you were at one of your low points, I mean, you laugh about it now, obviously.
Yeah, because what he said to me helped me realize that I was being carried. I wasn't doing it. It was being done through me. And that's the very thing I talked about, we heard earlier, in terms of the children love. It's a thing that carries us.
Yeah.
It's not only a thing that we participate in with others, but in doing so, we get back so much more than we give. And that's what we have to understand. It's about being selfish. Loving is really about being selfish.
And it's funny because the one thing that everybody wants in the entire world is to be loved. So the one thing they want is everybody wants to be loved. Whichever way they try to find it or try to get it, or naturally it comes, but I think it's more what you give out is how much love you will get back. And if you have this no love, you don't give any love, or you don't give anything like that, how can you get it back? You can't.
Exactly.
But sometimes I think as a parent, and I am a parent, it's hard to be on the receiving end because you're always positioning yourself as the giver, the nurturer, the care person that is the strength, the pillar of strength. And to open yourself up to be the receiver, especially when you have adult children, which I do, there are times when you literally have to consciously allow it to happen.
Yeah.
It's not as natural as it would seem. So, yeah.
Lee, did you experience, would you say, a higher degree or level of love than you ever have before in your life through this event?
Totally.
Yeah.
Much more.
They say that there's no higher frequency, a vibrational frequency than love. and that no disease can exist in the presence of that. And I wonder how much possibly had to do with the love and the disease's inability to exist within your body in that state.
There's so many things that are part of the whole, though, and that's one central thing for sure, I believe. But there's so many things. There's so many parts, and all of them carry us.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
just a wow, and that's what living consciously means. That's why I love the name of your program, by the way. But because it means that we recognize those things so we can live out of not just hope but gratitude, and thereby recognize inherently that we are being carried, we are being cared for, that we are important for our being, not our doing just.
Yep.
Right?
Do you think that we have to go through something like this to understand what love is? Because it seems like you, Lee, you had actually been through a lot, and then you suddenly realized all this love that was coming to you. So it's like you have to go through something really bad or to find out where love is. Is that so?
That part really ticks me off.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I think so.
But I think you're right. But I don't like it.
No, it's awful. I agree with you. Why do we have to go through these? It's like everybody recognizes you when you do something bad, but you never get compliments when you do something good. They just wander on.
Well, I wanted to ask you, are you creating a protocol that will literally help people go through the chemotherapy and the treatment for these kinds of cancers with the brain state technology?
We not only a protocol, but we've already created a prototype that they could potentially use at home.
That's incredible.
Yeah, we have a prototype ready, and we're looking for an investor to build that product and make it available for a very inexpensive price if we can.
That's fantastic. Wow.
That can be my gift.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. Wow.
That's a lot of love coming back.
Well, now he knows how to give it.
We talk a lot about we talk about on this show a lot about being willing to be vulnerable, because that's one of the ways we get access to on the show to who we really are. And I sometimes have to poke even myself and the cast members to be willing or to even consider to be vulnerable by sharing something. Now, with your experience, and with our cast members, of course, it's always optional. They don't have to get vulnerable if they don't feel like it. But with your experience, going through what you went through, I feel that you didn't really have an option. Do I want to be vulnerable or not? You just had to be. You were forced to be.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And share that with us. How was that like for you to be so vulnerable? I mean, and almost maybe 100% having no control. What was that like? And especially when that came to relationships and people that were close to you.
There was a time, I think, when it shook the core of me to realize that vulnerability was not the end. And that I don't know, we get, for those of us who believe that life and love and life energy is connecting us all, we're often looked at as kind of woo-woo people or what, But the truth is,
people from Boulder,
the truth is that's the truth.
Yeah.
We don't want the truth.
and so I have just a lot more confidence in that now, and don't blush or back down. And I've already met with a number of investors, potential investors, and that's not what they want to hear. They want to look at the numbers and the forecasts. And I say, the numbers and the forecasts are secondary. What you have to know is that this can be an object to help people love, and that thereby helps change the world or lots of people's worlds. And that's what's important about it.
So they weren't interested in that. They were only interested in the bottom line, how much money they could make. Correct?
Well, they were taken back by it because you're interested in what you're taught. And this is a new way to see it. And I still have some of them, of course, walked off, of course, pretty quickly.
Because you were honest.
Thank God.
You didn't want them anyway. You don't want them anyway. Good job they walked off. Save your time and effort.
Lee, looking back, say, from 2 years in the future, looking back, how much credit you think you may give to the experience that you've gotten to go through for the success of helping others in the future?
I think it's going to be a lot of the credit, but it's not going to be just this instance. Mm-hmm. It's going to be both the big and small instances all along the road. And somebody said, I just don't like it. I don't like the fact that you got to be, bent over to grow.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's why can't we just do it from our hearts when we're all well and everything's fine and everything's wonderful and it directly from our hearts, rather than wait for the tragedy or something to happen? So I agree.
Lee, do you think that potentially we need that source of, or that amount of powerful energy in order to get us to get faced in the direction that we need to be, in order to achieve or believe in what's possible in our lives?
I do. I think that the strength that we have following the dis-ease is not personal strength anymore, but it's strength going through us and not from us.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no more ego. That's gone.
Yeah.
And when there's no more ego, then that actually can come through us. And for some people, and everyone's threshold is different, I think people with the ego, even if they're not aware that that's where they're operating, need the bigger bang of the experience in order to shake that off. And it's fine. I mean, in some ways, it just is. And, we can evaluate it forever, and yet it's such an it's just what it is. I mean, at some point, it just is.
Yeah, but I don't think it's that important how we get to what Lee has got to, as long as we get to it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. But I don't think everyone will need to go through that in order to get to where you are, because I think everyone really does have a different threshold. Mm-hmm. But for those who do, it's wonderful to see that you did and you are, and you're helping so many other people with what you've discovered for yourself, and that's amazing.
Yeah, no doubt.
But see if our audience can hear the part of what Steve was saying in terms of today's a good day to start meditation.
Yes.
Any day.
It's the best day, actually.
It's a good day. Yeah.
The best day is the first day.
Because tomorrow may not come.
Oh, don't say that.
It may not be
later tomorrow.
I would tee it up. I'd advise teeing it up today.
Yeah. I agree. Do what you can today.
So, Lee, I didn't hear you say the word guided, but that word just keeps resonating with me. Do you feel like in some way you've been guided through this process, or is that not a proper word for you from your experience?
Yeah, I think it's more being shot out of a slingshot. I don't know about the guidance part.
How about today? Are you being guided today by your higher self in your more conscious living?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Well, don't hope, you are. Hope is always hope. But I think you are definitely where you are. Hope you can hope forever. But I definitely think, Lee, you are definitely where a lot of people would love to be. So I hope they're listening to the program and will realize what you can do and who you can be and drop that ego, which is what you've done, Lee.
There's that word hope again. I'm wondering if there is something in there that we're missing.
Hope? Well, live in hope, die in despair.
Yeah, true.
Okay.
Well, I don't know about this word hope. I'm not that crazy about that word because
it's an awful word. It's always hoping. You'll never get there. Never. Hoping, I hope.
You know, it's again. I mean, I don't know if I said this before. I probably have, but I mean, people hope to win the lottery today. So what? So there is a better chance of a 747 landing on the top of my house than for people to win the lottery.
Well, you know what's so interesting? If you ask a lot of those people who hope to win, if they even play, the answer is no.
So, it's already no. It's like me telling them, I hope I have dinner tonight. Well, I'm not hoping I have dinner tonight. I know I'm going to have dinner tonight. I know that. So,
Steve, I totally agree with you. The word hope, it's a word I don't like. It's just
it's a hopeless word.
It's a hopeless word. It's sort of like wanting something. It presupposes that you can't have it. But in those elements of wanting and hope, I wonder if we bring up a level of belief or even a spark of belief that may not exist otherwise in an individual's life. And I believe that the belief is where the real power comes from. And you add that together with love and belief, I think you got a recipe for anything that you want to achieve in your life.
Yeah, then you have to add faith in there too.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, Lee is so fascinating. I mean, Lee, I love you to be on our show as a guest because I was planning on several of our cast members share something that brought them down to their knees, but I gave that up a half hour ago because it's so fascinating. And what I was hearing throughout your share is that, and it's just so clear to me right now, is that in those conversations, like the doctors were having these professionals, PhDs, doctors, were having these conversations with you, and they were negative conversations, but there was somebody on your team that was very positive, and I'm not going to use the hope word, but what I'm going to use instead, I think possibility is a much better word than hope. But she was presenting a possibility to you, and correct me if I'm off here, but I feel that it's your intuition that told you that that's the possibility I want to hang on to, and that's what I want to support, and that's who I'm going to follow, not these other yahoos that were very negative.
It was so strong, that intuition, that after she about scolded me when I asked her about treatment, she said, "What are your questions? Or what do you want me to know?" And I told her first about my ignorance of treatment, my ignorance of cancer treatment. Then she scolded me, and then I stopped and I said, "And I want you to know that wherever you lead, I follow."
Beautiful.
Wow.
Great.
Fantastic.
That's faith. That's faith.
And trust.
And trust, yes. Yeah.
And that was intuition and trust. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we have to learn to do sometimes, I think, is to trust.
But
a lot of people don't do that, but we have to learn to definitely trust ourselves of our inner feelings and our inner self.
It was also interesting to me that in 2 or 3 other cases within like 7 days prior to meeting with her, I had heard programs or read certain things, and one of them that stuck out the most was the one about Steve Jobs, who had in fact a very close friend and somebody that he worked, a creative director from New York. Steve was, of course, in California. His close friend was diagnosed with cancer, and Steve called him when Steve found out, he called him at 3 o'clock in the morning. His friend said that wasn't uncommon for Steve Jobs. And the one thing that Steve Jobs told him is to trust in the modality that you're going to follow to be cured for your cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And because I had considered a naturopathic modality, I'd considered a homeopathic modality, considered going away to a treatment center, and then it was interesting that I met this particular doctor who was only 5 minutes from my home. That's where the Mayo Clinic here in Scottsdale, and and everything was sort of hit me that was the correct decision for me. And when it hit me, that was it. I wasn't going to deviate from that.
You knew it was right. You knew within yourself that was right.
That was the road for me.
Yeah. Why do you think that happened? Why do you think you came to that conclusion that fast?
We have tidbits of information along the way, right? Mm-hmm. that help feed our intuitive side.
Yes.
And that's when we can take action. And my action was just real determination to do what she advised.
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting that once I went through 6 chemotherapy sessions and she wanted me to go to another, I said, no, I've had enough.
Wow.
If I go through another, I think it's going to kill me.
And that was your inside telling you that. That's what you were feeling.
And
you thought, I'm going to listen to myself, I'm going to say it, and I'm going to listen. Because a lot of us listen to that but still do it. So, but you didn't.
And she immediately accepted it.
Because she probably knew too.
I love her for that.
Yeah.
That she has the technical knowledge on the one hand, but she also seems to be humanistic enough. And you would, I'm sorry, I won't mention her name now, but you'd think of her more as a drill sergeant kind of person.
Well, protocol. She was going through her protocol. You're supposed to have this, this, and this, and this, and this, and she just looked at you and said, okay, which in other words, she went to her gut feeling, like you went to your gut feeling.
Yeah, it was really, really cool.
Yeah, that is cool when you do a gut feeling. Yeah.
So since we're coming down to the very end of the show here, I just want to take another minute and just take a last swing at recommending some things to our viewers when they are in turbulent times, that they don't get lost in the negativity and get lost in depression and all these other things, but see the positive aspect and also the goodness that can come out of these experiences as quickly as possible. What would you recommend?
What I recommend? Of course, I would recommend to try to get my brain as functionally balanced as I could, and that certainly can happen with brainwave optimization, and I think it can also happen in other ways, to some degree at least. I think that's very, very important. And from there, that provides us a foundation from which we can build or move.
Okay.
Awesome.
Anybody else?
I really believe that we are never given more than what we can handle, and to understand that in a moment of extreme contrast, which is what I would call any difficult situation for myself, there is opportunity for immense clarity, and I do believe that we are never given more than we can handle. So.
I agree with that. I just went through actually a big, very, very large problem, which I won't go into. It'll take too long.
Yeah.
But I did come to the conclusion what I had to do, and it was all to do with me and nobody else. And I took that and I sorted it all out, which has to be connected to the brain, obviously, Lee, which is what you were saying. And I sort of sorted it out. And I said, well, I've got to sit back and take care of this and take the reins and do what I need to do, which I did, and it's all worked out 100%. Just because I admitted it to myself, I took it onto myself and sorted it out, and it's come out 100%. So I do agree with you, Jamie.
Yeah, I think what I want to add to that is that it's almost like what we should get is that the experience that's happening, or the turbulent times that we're going through, we're not going through it because we're being punished or because something negative has to happen, for sure. It's almost, for me, it's like it's a cloaked, I don't know if I'm using the right word, but that's what's coming to me right now. It's cloaked in this negative, turbulent experience, but it's happened for a good reason.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want people to understand. And just because we don't know what that good reason is in the moment, that doesn't necessarily matter.
Yeah. It's not always bad. It's always a good thing sometimes that wraps around it. And when it wraps around it, you think it's, because we always seem to think bad. It's always bad, bad, bad. But suddenly when it wraps around it, it's a good thing, because then that's when you can get it together and sort it out, because it can always end up in a good way.
There are days when the darkness is so dark,
Yes.
the storm is raging so much
Yes.
that you don't believe that you're given, you're not given more than you can handle, because you can't handle it anymore.
Yeah, right.
And so I don't want our viewers to think that if they brought to their knees, that's a bad thing.
No.
There are others that will handle it with you if you will reach out and allow them to. And so not being given more than you can handle doesn't mean that if you're brought down to almost nothing,